Edmund is the bastard son of the Earl of Gloucester and becomes the villain of this play that is the catalyst for a lot of the evil that Lear's daughters perpetrate. But it becomes evident very early on in the play that Edmund, because he is a bastard, has suffered a life of psychological neglect and abuse. I'm going to read Act 1, Scene 1, lines 18 to 24. But I have, sir, a son by order of law, some year older than this, who yet is no dearer in my account. Though this knave came suddenly saucily to the world before he was sent for, yet his mother was fair. There was good sport at his making, and the whoreson must be acknowledged. Do you know this nobleman, Edmund? Just imagine, this seems a commonplace way for Gloucester to talk about Edmund, but just imagine that if this is basically a father, when talking about his son, saying, his mother was a whore, but we had fun at his making. Here he is. I love him. It doesn't seem as authentic and as caring as a father should be. And the commonplace way in which Gloucester does it can be extrapolated from that Edmund has faced a lifelong of neglect and abuse, not necessarily intentionally, but just for the fact that he was born a bastard child, which would be much less acceptable in Shakespeare's time than it would have been in contemporary society. As the play progresses and Edmund fulfills his role as the villain, he is thought of as merely inherently evil, as he has taken out the trepidations of his childhood, the trepidations of young adulthood, and he's expressed his anger by trying to take control of his life, by trying to take control of the kingdom. But with Edmund, he's a character who fits the mold of a traditional Shakespeare character, but eventually breaks from that mold when he tries to reverse his decision and save the lives of Cordelia and King Lear, who he had ordered executed. At this point, we reveal a fact that Lear's mind, sorry, not Lear, that Edmund's mind may have been driven towards insanity by the treatment he received as he was growing up. So I am going to read Act 5, Scene 3, lines 206 to 208. Edmund is speaking. This speech of yours hath moved me, and shall perchance do good, but speak you on. You look as you have had something more to say. This is Edmund reacting to the speech by his brother Edgar about their father, and it stirs within Edmund emotions that he was unfamiliar, that he's been out of touch with, that he's unfamiliar with for most of his life. And he realizes that there is something more to life than seeking revenge for crimes that were committed against him for the very fact that he was a bastard, for the very fact that his life wasn't what it could have been if he was born as a legitimate child. This Edmund seems to actually hear his brother, and react by rethinking and reevaluating everything he's done to that point. I'm also going to read Act 5, Scene 3, lines 248 to 250. And this is Edmund speaking about himself. Yet Edmund was beloved. The one, the other poisoned for my sake, and after slew herself. This is Edmund alluding to the fact that Lear's two daughters, Goneril and Regan, have both died as a direct result of their competing love for Edmund, the bastard child, despite the fact that they both had suitors of their own. In a rather gruesome way, it is revealed to Edmund that there were people out there who truly loved him. There were people out there that actually deeply cared for him. They cared enough that they were willing to risk their lives, and eventually they died for their love for him. And it's a gruesome exploration of those facts, but to Edmund, he finally realizes that his life isn't necessarily defined by who his parents are. It's defined by the person he can try and be. And he realizes that he had people that loved him. It took the psychological pressures of being a bastard child, of being his youth, of fully embracing what that did to him for a time period, and embracing it by leading the charge to take over the kingdom, by leading the army, and ordering the executions of King Lear and Cordelia. He embraces the side of madness that exists in all of us. He lets it flower. He lets it bloom, and he lets it take control of himself. But when that takes control of his mind, it pushes him to a point where he breaks, and he realizes that, you know what, there are people that love me, and I'm not defined by who my parents are. I'm defined by what I make myself to be. And Edmund, he tries, in the spirit of this, he tries to stop the executions he's ordered of King Lear and the executions of Cordelia, but he's too late. But that doesn't negate the fact that clarity was brought to Edmund's mind before he dies, as he does die as well. Clarity was brought to his mind by the fact that madness took over his mind. He was pushed to the edge. The totality of life's experiences, of the pressures of society, of the pressures he's putting on himself, of the pressures his father exerts on him by freely tossing around the story of his conception, the pressures put on him by the fact that he has two daughters of the king competing for his love, the pressures that he's leading an army, the pressures that just come as an inherent part of life, all come crashing down on Edmund. And Edmund, he breaks. His mind goes mad, and his mind basically becomes a blank slate, and he can realize that there's people that love him. He can realize that he is the sole director of his life, that he has the ability to make it, and it's not necessarily dictated for him by who his parents were or by the fact that he was conceived out of wedlock. This clarity is only brought forth because he faced the madness of the totality of all those actions. He faced it, he embraced it, he faced it head on, and it brought forth a new understanding to him of what life was before he died.